Chapter 55, The Lodgers. So remember when we left off last, Brightbill has migrated with the other geese and it's winter. Roz's nest, the roof had collapsed due to all the snow. It was a really cold and snowy winter. And when she went out exploring, she found that some of the animals weren't surviving. So each night she started a fire in her nest and she would yell out, if you need help or you're cold, like come in, like you're welcome to be here. So let's see who took her up on that offer. Chapter 55, The Lodgers. Firelight spilled out from the nest and into the cold, blustery night. Roz sat inside and listened to the wind and the soft pops and cracks of the burning wood. And then the robot's keen hearing picked up another sound, tiny footsteps crunching through the snow. Roz, I'm freezing. Can I join you by the fire, please? Said a weak voice. Into the light crawled Chit-Chat. The squirrel was shivering and clumps of ice stuck to her fur. When she finally felt the heat of the fire, she collapsed. Roz picked her up off the floor, gently placed her on a warm stone, and let her sleep. An hour later, there were more footsteps, and a family of hares shuffled into the nest. They huddled together in a corner without saying a word. Pinktail, the possum, was the next to arrive. Good evening, she mumbled, trying to act cheerful. It certainly has been chilly. Swooper, the owl, hobbled in following some chickadees and a magpie. Fink knew a good thing when he saw it, and the fox lay down right by the fire. Then came Dig Down the groundhog. The fuzzy bandits carried in an old turtle named Cat Crag, who was in the worst shape of all. Creatures who would have been hibernating deep underground had been roused by the vicious weather. Only the healthiest animals with the warmest homes were safe. More and more wary animals appeared, and slowly the lodge filled up. So here's the nest. So she redid the roof, and the fire smoke is coming out the top of the chimney, and then she's letting all these friends in who are freezing. This was the first time many of the lodgers had seen fire, and they gazed at it with a mixture of fear and hope. They could feel the fire's destructive power, but they could also feel its healing power as it warmed their bones. The lodgers seemed to push forward, eager to feel more warmth, and then pull back, afraid of feeling too much. It was important that the lodgers understood fire, so Roz showed them how to build one. She showed the smaller animals how to arrange the kindling and showed the bigger animals how to arrange the logs. Bumpkin, Lumpkin, and Rumpkin struck the firestones together, and everyone cheered when they finally managed a spark. As Roz looked around, she saw moles curling up beside an owl, a mouse snuggling next to two weasels, hares nestled against a badger. Never before had the robot seen prey and predators so close and so peaceful. How long could this peace possibly last? I propose a truce, said Roz, like the Dawn Truce. Everyone must agree not to hunt or harm one another while in my lodge. Very well, said Swooper, after consulting his carnivorous friends. We hunters will control ourselves. Then it is settled, said Roz. My home is a safe place for all. One by one, the lodgers fell into a deep sleep. Even the nocturnal creatures, usually awake at the hour, gave in to the coziness of the nest. The robot stood out of the way and quietly tended to the fire as her guests slept through the night. Only when daylight was streaming in through the door did the lodgers finally begin to stir. You are welcome to stay as long as you like, said the robot as the animals rubbed sleep from their eyes. My home is your home. Thanks a lot, Roz. Fink carefully stepped over a hare and a woodpecker on his way out. I don't think I would have survived another night on my own. It's just too bad we can't cram a few more creatures in here. And the fox slipped away. The robot looked down at the fur and the feathers and now carpeted the floor. The nest had been completely full that night. If any more animals showed up, they'd been left out in the cold. But Roz was not about to let that happen. Chapter 56, The New Lodges. The second lodge would have been bigger than the first if it was going to fit Broadfoot the bull moose. He was a towering hulk of an animal and had thick coat of fur, but even he was struggling with the frigid temperatures. Broadfoot lived on the other side of the pond in a dense section of forest that was home to many animals, most of whom were in desperate need of a good thaw. The winter days were short, so there was no time to waste, and rather than walking all the way around the pond, Roz tested its frozen surface to see if it was safe to cross. She threw a heavy rock high in the air and watched it bounce off hard ice. Then she carefully walked over the ice and into the forest on the other side, where she found Broadfoot waiting for her. The moose quietly led the robot to the clearing in the trees where the new lodge would go. Then Roz made a fire and watched as cold creatures began crawling out from the shadows. "Do not worry," said the robot, with the growing crowd, steam puffing from their noses. "You will be warm soon, but I need your help." Roz asked the animals to collect anything useful they could find: large stones, strong branches, chunks of frozen mud. With the robot's building expertise and the small army of helpers, construction of the second lodge didn't take long. The animals happily agreed to the robot's truce, and they shuffled into the warm wooden dome. "If you keep the fire alive, it will keep you alive," explained Roz as she dropped another log into the flame. "But be careful. Fire can turn deadly in an instant." At dawn, heavy snow was falling again, and there was Roz setting up from the nest to build a third lodge. She trudged through the great meadow where fierce winds had created enormous sweeping snowdrifts, and she powered through and finished the job, and soon began working on a fourth lodge, and then a fifth. The island became dotted with lodges that all glowed warmly through those long winter nights, and inside each one, animals laughed and shared stories and cheered their good friend, Roz. Man, Roz has really changed from the beginning of the story till now. Remember in the beginning of the story? And no one wanted to be her friend. They called her a monster, and the bear chewed off her foot. Now she's helping them stay alive. Chapter 57. The Fire. Strange sounds were echoing from far side of the pond. What started as a low murmur gradually swelled into a chorus of terrified voices. There was an eerie glow in that part of the forest, and a thick plume of smoke began rising up from the snowy treetops. Roz charged across the ice and found the second lodge, completely engulfed in a raging fire. Frightened animals were running in every direction, fleeing for their lives through the deep snow. "What happened?" shouted Roz as Broadfoot galloped wildly past. "We put too many logs on the fire pit," he said without stopping. "The flames climbed up to the ceiling." "My baby is still in there," cried a mother hare, pointing at the burning lodge. "Somebody help, please." Roz didn't hesitate. She plowed through the snow and dunked into the lodge. Flames and smoke were everywhere. A tall stack of logs blazed in the fire pit, and in the far corner a tiny ball of fur was shaking with fear. Crouching low, the robot wound her way beneath the smoke and around the flames and gently scooped up the young hare. "Do not worry," Roz yelled over the roar of the fire. "You are going to be okay." She turned to leave, but the doorway had started to crumble. So she shielded the hare with her body and smashed right through the walls of the lodge. Sizzling pieces of wood went flying as the robot and the hare burst outside into the soft snow. "Oh, darling, you're all right," cried the mother hare, pulling her daughter close. "Thank you for saving my baby, Roz." Now that everyone was safely away, the robot turned her attention to putting the fire out. Her glowing eyes darted around as she computed a plan. Then, with all the strength in her legs, Roz launched herself high to the snowy branches of the nearest pine tree. A moment later, the tree was shaking violently, and heaps of snow were sliding from its branches and pouring onto the flames like an avalanche. Steam hissed up through the smoldering mound of snow. The flames quickly died. The snow quickly melted, and within minutes, all that remained was the charred foundation of the lodge. Roz dropped down from the tree and waited as the frightened animals slowly returned. Then she said to them, "Would you like to make another lodge?" The animals looked at one another, unsure what to do. Understandably, they were afraid of another fire breaking out. But they were far more afraid of the deadly cold. So they pulled together and worked with Roz and built a bigger, better lodge on top of the old one. It had a taller ceiling and a deeper fire pit. It was made with more rock and less wood and had a supply of water for emergencies. But the most important safety features of this rebuilt lodge were the lodgers themselves, who now had a whole new respect for fire. Chapter 58, The Conversations. Thanks to Roz's truth, life inside the nest was mostly harmonious. But when the animals went outside, it was business as usual. Sometimes a lodger wouldn't return. Sometimes a lodger would return in the belly of another lodger. And you can imagine that made for some awkward moments. So when everyone was gathered around the fire, they tried to keep things pleasant by having conversations like these. I wonder what Brightbill is doing right now. Chit-Chat lay on her back and looked at the ceiling as she spoke. And where he is and who he's with and if he ever thinks about us back here on the island. I'm sure he thinks about us, said Roz. I think about him all the time. I like to imagine the geese had a fun flight to the wintering grounds, and now Brightbill is floating on a lovely lake, eating yummy food, and making wonderful new friends. But hopefully they're not too wonderful, because I'd like to stay his best friend if possible. That is a nice thought, said Roz, but I worry that the flock might have gotten caught in this icy weather. I do not think they would handle it well. Don't worry, I'm sure they're fine, said Chit-Chat. Brightbill is such a great flyer. I just know he'll keep the flock out of trouble. He is a great flyer, said Roz, but I still worry. Life is short. Dig Down, the old groundhog, was giving another one of his fireside speeches. I'll be lucky if I see the spring. I don't want your pity. I've had a good run. But I'll tell you what. If I could do it all over again, I'd spend more time helping others. All I've done is dig tunnels. Some of them were real beauties too. But they're all hidden underground. And they're no good to anyone but me. And they weren't even good to me this winter. Now the beavers, they have it all figured out. They built that beautiful dam which created a lovely pond that made our lives better. That must feel mighty good. The beavers made our lives better in another way, said Fink. They taught Roz how to build. Ain't that the truth, said Dig Down. Roz, you must have saved half the island with your lodges, and to think we used to call you a monster. I'll repay my debt to you if it's the last thing I do. Your friendship is payment enough, said Roz. Oh, please. Your sweetness is going to make me sick. There must be something we can do. Your friendship is really enough. Friends help each other, and I will need all the help I can get. My mind is strong, my body won't last forever. I want to survive as long as possible, and to do that I will need the help of my friends. The animals listened quietly to Roz and thought of their own struggles to survive. Life in the wilderness was very hard for everyone, but there was no escaping that fact. But the robot had made their lives a little easier, and if ever they could, the animals would return the favor. I have seen 93 winters, far more than any of you. Crag the turtle spoke slowly, but everyone always listened to his words. And I can tell you that the winters have gotten colder, and the summers have gotten hotter, and the storms have gotten fiercer. I heard that the ocean had gotten higher, said Chit-Chat, but I don't know how that could be true. I mean, where would all that extra water come from? You are right, the ocean is higher, said Crag. My grandfather used to say that long ago this island was not an island at all, but a mountain surrounded by flatlands. And then the ground shook and the oceans grew, and the land slowly flooded until the mountains became this island. Animals from far and wide were forced to come here to escape the floodwaters. In those early days, there were too many animals living in too small a place. The island did not have enough food to feed them all, but between fighting and disease and famine, a balance was finally reached, and we have kept the balance ever since. Chit-Chat's eyes grew wider with concern. If the ocean keeps rising, will the island be swallowed up by the waves? I don't know how to swim. To be continued on Tuesday.